Welcome to Adoption Now, telling your adoption story. This is our recap show. So we just released a podcast with Reshma, who is an adoptee from India, and it was a heavy show. We have a lot of adoptees right now applying to be on the show. They want to be heard, and it's important for us to listen to them. And it's important for us to hear some of the hard things they're saying and some of the process that they're going through. We can be mature enough as adoptive parents to say, okay, I can hear what she's saying and try to understand that, because what that does for us is it makes our lives richer, and we have a bigger pool to draw from when we need advice with our children. But it's important for us to listen. And Noah was on the show. Noah, what did you think?
It is tough. I mean, there's so much emotion involved. And I think, like you've said before, Reshma is brave, honestly, to be able to get to this point where she's exploring and learning new things and experiencing all the feelings that she was told she couldn't have, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think some of it comes across as a little harsh and hard to hear, especially as an adoptive dad.
Mm-hmm.
But I also think, if we don't allow our kids to feel certain ways, then of course, I mean, I think about even my own life with my own parents and how they were very clear on, like, you can't feel this way because it's not the Christian way to feel. And I'm still dealing with that now at almost 40 years old, right? And so I want it to be an encouragement. And I even told you this before. I said, one of the things that I hope that eventually Reshma gets to this place of, like, I have this purpose, because for me and for you, there's a purpose for her that unfortunately she did go through this experience. But fortunately for us, we are now learning. And I do hope that adoptees continue to have what was the term she used?
Coming out of the fog.
Yes.
Have that experience.
Yes.
Yeah, it was hard. And she did say, I hate that I was adopted. And it like hurts my heart, but also I agree with that. There are times when I look at our 4 children and I am sad for their families that don't get to see what amazing little people they are. Mm-hmm. There are times when I think there are issues that we're going to have to deal with that are hard, right? And there's brokenness because of adoption. Although I'm so happy because I love these kids and it's such an honor to be their mom. I can see what she's saying. There's a lot of pain there that, that people told her what to think. And I think adoptees would say that really strongly is, I don't want to be told that I'm so lucky. Don't tell me that I would have died if they wouldn't have adopted me. Don't tell me your parents are amazing, you're so lucky. Adoptees don't want to hear that, because the truth of it is we're all lucky, right? This is all a part of our journey, and no one wants to be told how to feel. Nobody wants to be told, you just said that. Yeah. You didn't want your parents to say, oh, Noah, it's not that bad. Oh, Noah. You wanted to be heard. And if you feel something in your heart, you want people to say, yeah, I get that. And she said that there are a lot of adoptees who don't know how to talk to their parents. That also kind of hurt my heart, because I really try to get my kids to talk to me and open up to me. And if there is that fear of, I don't want to hurt my parents by saying that I feel this way, how can we create a place that's safe for them? Yeah. What do you think?
Well, by working on creating a safe place, but also being aware that maybe there is an adoption therapist out there that can, one of the interviews that you had with Glenn, right? It was a camera. It wasn't even another person. It was just a camera and an adoptee talking. And they were sharing things that they hadn't told their entire life to anyone. So sometimes it might even be just backing away, right? That's hard to say, but as an adoptive family, sometimes you just have to back off and let your kid feel a certain way. I do think they'll come around. I really do. I think not every experience is the same, right? Some kid may, for a day, have to go through this one emotion and then be fine, and it's like it's never happened again.
That's true. I'm that person.
Yeah,
I was like that as a kid. If I was allowed to feel that, I would feel it so strongly, and then I'd be like, oh, I don't feel that anymore, because I was able to process it. And my mom never stopped me from doing that, and I want to impart that in my children. One of the things that Reshma talked about was going back to India, and she does this movie. It's called Calcutta Is My Mother, and she talks about her experience with identifying with the culture and all these things. I mean, I can't wait to see the movie. But it's very interesting to hear people's journeys, and we're just here to support you. We're just here to listen and support, and some of the things that are said on our podcast are hard for us too, but it doesn't take away from the story. And I want to bring John DeYoung on really quick. He told his story. He's an adoptee from South Korea, and he also goes to India. Now he's been there like 20 times, and he heard Reshma's story, and I want to just ask him what he thinks about the whole adoptee voice. Hey, John.
Hi, April. How are you?
Welcome to the after show.
Excited. Thank you.
Hey, so I don't want people to feel sad, overly sad. I want people to feel sad if they want to feel sad, but I don't want people to feel like, should I even adopt? Like I have adopted kids. Am I failing my adopted kids? How can I make them feel loved? Why did we choose this? You know, there's so many things that go into it, and we want successful parents because we want successful children. What's your advice?
Oh man, that's a really good question. I think one of the things that we have to a little bit. Okay, so I'll go back to my story a little bit. It's the narrative of my story is in the 70s when my parents adopted me in 1976. There was not a lot of resources. There was no help. And people, I think a lot of American families were just like excited about adopting children, and I think that's a good thing. I think that's a really good thing. What was what was difficult possibly is in the 70s and 80s is there was just not a lot of talk, and there was no resources for families. And so I think we have to be careful. I have to be careful to not take that narrative, put it in 2019 and 2020, and be like, well, why didn't they? Why didn't they? No, I think that we have to be careful about that because I could do that, and I did do that when I was younger. But that was because my narrative was slowly transforming, right? My story's changing along the times. And so, so yes, I want to encourage parents. Now we have organizations like Adoption Now, like your organization, a lot of resources out there. And adoption doesn't get any easier, but you have a lot more resources. You have a ton more support. You have better communities, and you just have a lot more information. So I think, if I were to be adopted now, it would be a different narrative, right?
Can I adopt you?
Yeah.
That was my next question. So I'm glad we went into that.
That would be interesting. All right. But I think that, so that's it. And so I had so listening to her story it was powerful. And I think it's awesome because our narratives are our own. And I did agree with her. It is very difficult, and it can puncture, it can wound an adoptee if you say, well, you need to feel like this, or you can't feel like this, or you have to act like this. And that can be wounding, and an additional wound to already like, all right, so who is my mom, and, like, I know I come from a mother and father, and so like I'm the third part of that party, and I'm missing two parts. And Noah and I were talking about that earlier. It's like, there's three parts. It's a mom, dad, and a child, and all three come together to make the one child, right? It's like, that's
to make
what
the
happens.
adoption.
Yeah. And so, when I went back to Suwon, Korea, I think it was about 7 years ago, I went back and I got a chance to experience my culture. My Korean, I am not Korean. I'm pretty American. I identify as an American, probably, and when I got there, even though I probably was walking through some like, okay, so I'm not as Korean as I thought I was, and I probably struggled a little bit. But when I ended up talking to Billy Kim, who was the pastor that I was talking to, who actually ended up restoring and taking over my orphanage, he pointed it to me, and he was like, "You're like my son," and he was also adopted, and it just really created this really cool bond. And so for me, I there was some like a few questions, and it kind of did feel weird. I'm around a bunch of Koreans, and I'm pretty American, but at the end of my conversation with Billy Kim and my experiences too, when I was there for 3 days, I felt like it closed so many gaps for me, and it like was healing in a lot of ways. There is always beauty that comes from ashes, and it's not only adoptees, it's single moms, it's single dads, it's everyone in America, everyone in a developing country, everyone in Europe. I mean, everyone has an beauty from ashes story. And as our narrative starts to mature, and we start seeing things in hindsight, you kind of look back and go, oh, okay. And if I personally would not have been adopted, I mean, at that time, over 40% of the children back then were dying, and so, yes, don't tell me I'm blessed, but I'm blessed.
Yeah.
I feel it in my heart. I really, really, really do. And it took me a little while to get here. Trust me. I was not happy that when I was first adopted, I rebelled very hard. But now I'm like, man, in hindsight and looking at my narrative now, I'm like, I want to adopt. I want to be I want to be a part of another child's story who may have a different narrative, right? I can't. I'm not gonna be able to predict their narrative if I don't adopt them, but maybe it would be cool to be part of that story. In that situation.
We do have a story coming up as well where an adult adoptee from South Korea is going to Ghana to adopt. And so I think it's very cool when an adoptee decides, I'm going to continue that on. I want to be a part of a child's life. I do love adoption. She said on there that she hates that she was adopted, and we talked about that. I hate that too. I hate brokenness and pain. But one of the things that I really took away from what she said was that feeling in Christianity or in our testimony is saying, you should feel this way, child. You have these great parents. You should go up and tell your story. Tell everybody how you're a miracle. Tell everybody. And I think that allowing the child to make their own narrative, even though they know their story, is so important. And when they say, I don't really like it when you tell everybody my story, don't tell everybody their story. I mean, that's one of the things that she said, that her parents would tell everybody the story as soon as they come up, and they go, oh, is she adopted? Yes, she was 1 pound, and it's a beautiful story. There was nothing incriminating or terrible, but it made her feel uncomfortable. And recognizing that your child needs you to notice when they feel small, or when they feel excluded, or when other people are making them feel like, what? How much was that child? Because in an interracial family, we get that, right? Yeah. People come up to us all the time. And so I'm watching my children and how their body language is when people approach us. And then I can parent better. And I think before, parents were just like, you're part of our family. What's the problem? And everybody else around them in the church was saying, you're awesome. You're so lucky to be here. And that is an old way. And we are pushing this adoption movement into not thinking like that, not being like that, because it's not really healthy for anybody. Nobody wants to be told, you're lucky. Your parents are amazing, especially when you're a teenager. You're like, no matter if you're adopted or not. But we need to give people a place to speak. And then when they're older, they won't be so like, now's my time to speak. And now all I'm going to speak is just anger, right? Because I never got a chance. And so now I'm going to do this. And so I really learned a ton from that story. It was hard for me. And if you listen to that and you thought, oh my gosh, I was not as encouraged as I thought, I just want to encourage you that it is a beautiful story. And she does really, really love her parents. Yeah. And she does have a very close relationship with them. But the side that she's telling is the loss part. And that's okay. Yeah. We can have loss and gratitude live in the same place and still be completely healthy, happy people.
Yeah, I would encourage her. I think where she's at right now is where the film is. Where she's at right now is where the film's going to be, and her narrative's going to change. I agree with you, April, in the sense that we have to be careful as adoptive parents, whether Christian, Muslim, it doesn't matter what religion you are, to not utilize the platform of the adoption to feel like you said the hero, right? And say, I'm going to use the platform of my child and suddenly bolster my personal insecurities. I want to feel a little bit better. I want to feel cool, or I want to feel like I am the hero in the story. And so what I'll do is, because that can become a pattern, and we don't know how that's a slippery slope. The first time you might be super excited and be like, yes, and this is the story of the child, and then that might be okay because the child's an infant, but to utilize the child as a platform for yourself, I think that's where a lot of the resentment can slowly build, and then it does explode later on in life, because the 5-year-old's like, wait a minute, whether they know it or not, there's something calculating in the back of their head, saying, why is my story going to make you look better? And so those are the things that we need to be careful about, because the approach that you have with your adopted child and in your family, you probably need to communicate a little bit more clearly and have the conversations with your children. And I said in our first podcast that said, discover your child.
Mm-hmm.
Just discover.
Yeah.
Just
I
spend
love
some time
that.
to discover your child.
Yeah.
That's it.
And you know, we have been very careful on the show to be honorable to our stories, to our story. I always say when somebody applies, don't tell me anything you're not going to tell your child. Okay, don't tell the world. But this is a place we started telling these podcasts because we were stopped everywhere and everyone was like, how much were they? Where'd you get them? And I would, you know, when they're babies, like you said, I would just tell the story and eventually I don't want to tell the story when I'm buying carrots. I don't want to talk to you when I'm eating at Chili's. So we created these podcasts so that we could say, hey, here's more about our adoption journey, because it is my story too. And what I did as a parent and how we got into these roadblocks. And basically Noah and I's story is like, don't do this. But I think that for us, telling these stories is so important to help and to teach. So I don't mean like never tell your story. What we're talking about is when you allow the story to be kind of like your hero story in your church, or you allow other people to be like, you're amazing, tell your story. Doesn't mean you're not amazing. Doesn't mean that you're not a great parent. It just means that we take everything and we level the playing field. Yes, we had a role in this child's life, but this child has changed me. I mean, my 4 kids have changed me more than I probably have changed them. Adoption has honestly changed my life. And I tell the stories from that place, is that nobody's really a hero. And honestly, everything we did was empowered by God. I really, really believe that, because sometimes we tell someone the story, I'm like, how did we even do that? How did we even get through that? That wasn't in us.
Mm-hmm.
That was a supernatural thing that God equipped us to do. And I just believe that if you believe in God, He's directing your path. But you really have to protect your children from that belief system that like they have you have God, and everything is perfect. No, there's a lot of different elements that we have to look at, and that's what we're doing here at Adoption Now. Thank you for joining the after show. I appreciate you tuning in. Hey, don't forget to subscribe to YouTube. John, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Husband, wherever you are, thank you for doing the end part of the show. And check out that podcast. It's at adoptionnow.com. We'll see you next week.